So what's expected of you? As a certified ethical hacker, there are several things that you have to adhere to. One of those being the Code of Ethics, which you can go through and take a look at in detail at the following URL. So the domains of the Code of Ethics from EC Council include the following. First, when it comes to privacy, obviously as a security professional, you're going to come across information. And that information you're not supposed to collect, give, sell, trade, transfer, do anything with that information. So security numbers, customer databases, etc. When it comes to intellectual property, again, you're going to be exposed to a lot of information. And again, you as an ethical hacker are going to help protect that information for your customer or for your company. Disclosure. Disclosure, you may uncover some things that in some cases may actually be uncomfortable to talk about. I had a particular situation where the gentleman who hired us to come out to do a pen test, we came across some information, we'll just say it was of adult orientation, adult materials, and it was one of the no-nos of that company, and we had to expose that information. So you have to be willing to disclose everything that you discover to the appropriate person, and in some cases, authorities. When I had my ISP service, I had a particular customer that we weren't necessarily monitoring what people were doing. We had a proxy server, and in reviewing the proxy server, we saw some material that is considered illegal in the United States go across, and we turned that person in. Areas of expertise. You should never misrepresent yourself, pretending that you know more than what you really know. You need to be honest and upfront about any limitations that you actually might have in either your experience and or your education. There's nothing wrong with letting people know by saying, hey, this may be outside of my realm. Hopefully you have a network that you can bring in somebody that may have an expertise in that particular domain. Unauthorized usage. You should never knowingly use software or products that are obtained either unethically or illegally. Illegal activities. As you go through and you represent yourself as an ethical hacker, there may be situations that you have to make sure that you stay clear of, such as double billing or seeing that a particular project may or may not take a certain length of time and you do things that extend out your time so you can bill them for more financial gain. We would also include bribery. There are many situations where you might come across something, and as you're talking about it to an individual or a person within that company, there may be some type of bribery that may take place. And again, your job is to make sure you maintain that code of ethics. Authorization. As either a contractor or possibly an employee of a company, you need to make sure that you use their property in a way that is authorized and that it is to their knowledge and consent. We don't ever do things sneakily behind the door. Disclosure. Now, I know I mentioned disclosure previously. It's our third pull it down, but this is a different type of disclosure. There are many times that as you're doing pen tests or you're doing simulations, you might come across issues that you need to verify, or you need to notify a hardware manufacturer that you've discovered something. There was a great article that I was reading by a pen tester who was going through and he discovered a flaw, and it was a flaw on a hardware device that gave immediate and instant root access. And he went through, and before he would talk about it on his blog, he notified the manufacturer. And his frustration came from the manufacturer not necessarily taking the steps as quickly as he thought they should. It actually took over 100 and some odd days for them to actually respond, and finally for them to come public with the information. In the meantime, this ethical hacker was concerned that there were 25,000 plus users of this particular hardware device that were currently being exposed. So if you come across some type of a flaw, you do need to notify the manufacturer so that you can help fix other customers. If by chance they don't respond, I would probably, and this is actually what the author did, is he went through and started posting his frustration on Twitter and made sure he tagged this particular manufacturer so they could see that he was getting ready to announce it. And it wasn't until he got very close to finally coming out and telling everybody what the flaw was that they actually responded and came out with a fix. It was actually for a NAS device, a business-level NAS device, which was kind of interesting. Management. Anytime that you get involved in a project, you need to make sure that you have good management procedures in place so that you can make sure that, again, this kind of goes back to the issue of billing. You need to make sure you manage your projects appropriately. Make sure you have a goal and a time frame. And if you're going to have to adjust that time frame, you're going to manage it by letting people know. Knowledge sharing. As an ethical hacker, you need to add to the knowledge of e-commerce professionals by continually studying and sharing the things that you learn and the experiences you come across with fellow EC Council members and help to promote public awareness. I do this all the time by doing free community lectures on their focus towards the end user, because I think that's our biggest flaw out there right now is so many people don't know what they have in their homes and they don't know how to secure it. But we need to share that information and try to promote a public awareness. Confidence. As an ethical hacker, you should always present yourself in a professional and ethical and competent manner. This means even when you're possibly competing with someone else for a particular project. In layman's terms, no backstabbing, folks. Extreme care. Now, as we go through all the different courses in this series, we're going to be introducing some tools that can be extremely dangerous. So as an ethical hacker, you need to make sure that you conduct yourself and the software and the things that you deploy against a network, that you will have experience with those products, and you're not going to willy-nilly just execute some program on someone's network. You're going to do this extremely carefully. And when you come across a situation, we don't necessarily fix the situations. That may or may not be in our scope of our project. And even though we may think we know what's best for their company or for our company, we're still going to get guidance and clearance for any type of action. Malicious activities. Again, you are not going to associate with any type of malicious hackers or engage in any type of activities that would be considered malicious. No compromise. What we mean by this is that you are in no way going to purposely compromise or cause a company or organization system to become compromised through the process of your professional dealings with them. Legal limits. You're going to make sure that as you do these penetration tests, that everything that you're doing has been approved, authorized, and it was within the legal limits of the scope of your project. I know there's some really fun movies out there, where people are doing these tests and coming across information and doing things that may or may not be legal. That is not your purpose. Your purpose is to make sure you stay within those guidelines. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we talk about pen tests, that we are going to have a scope that we set up, that we understand exactly what it is we're doing, what our limitations are. We got to actually know where the goalposts are and where the sidelines are. What's considered out of bounds, what's considered fair play. Involvement. As an ethical hacker, you are making a promise. You're going to adhere to the code of ethics that you will not partake in any black hat activities or be associated with any black hat communities that are out there trying to endanger people's network's infrastructure. Now, that doesn't mean that, and we'll talk about this with vulnerability research, that doesn't mean that you're not monitoring them, but you're not going to help promote them. You're not going to help solve their problems, especially when it comes to dealing with online forums, which gets us to the last one, which is underground communities. So again, you are not going to be a part of any underground hacking communities for the purpose of being an evangelist or expanding the black hat knowledge or their activities. If you see something happening, again, I monitor. some of these communities to see what the big shindig is out there, and then I know that I use that as my part of my utility belt. There's my Batman reference. Part of my utility belt, so I know what hackers are thinking. Again, I would need to get this across to you. You should be thinking like a hacker. You are a profiler. And in order to understand the enemy, you've got to know what the enemy is doing and what they're up to.